All right, everyone, welcome back into another props video. Going to be doing the deep dive here into week 6. Let's go ahead and get into it. And so going to be getting into the 10 games that we have on Sunday. Looking at the first game, we got Washington versus Baltimore, which when we look at this on the 9 to 5 cheat sheet, we're going to see that this is going to be one of the higher scoring games on the slate. One of two games that is projected to be over 50 points for the game total. Now, the Baltimore Ravens are favored to win by almost 7 points, which to me, I don't know, that seems kind of strange. The Ravens are a team that tend to keep other teams around. That's just how they've been really the past 3 years. And so I don't know. I think that would be kind of a good starting point. And I'm actually kind of curious here. Just trying to see if there's any good bets. Not exactly. But really looking at this game, there is kind of a point of contention for this game and really for prop betting is Brian Robinson Jr. is currently questionable. If he were to sit, we're going to see a lot of Austin Eckler. And if this game truly is a 7-point spread in favor of the Ravens winning, then Austin Eckler would end up having a pretty good game in the passing game. Then looking at the Baltimore Ravens, they are pretty much healthy in terms of the players that we would be targeting in this matchup for props betting. And I would argue we are getting some of our better bets really in this game in general. Personally, this game is a game that I want to be targeting. Now, they have removed one of my favorite bets from when I kind of did the research for this slate. I really like the idea of doing Zach Ertz for over 3 receptions. He had gotten this over or a push in 4 out of 5 games thus far. Either way, if he does get 3 receptions, I think there's a good chance that Zach Ertz gets this over. He is still the lead tight end, playing about 60% of the snaps. So I still don't mind that over. Also, don't mind the idea of getting to Terry McLaurin in kind of a game stack. Now, I really like if you want to do fantasy score, we can do that. Do want to call out that there is a decent prop line difference for his receiving yards as well between PrizePicks and Underdog, and really the average sportsbook line there as well, which again a little bit strange. And then I personally really don't mind the idea of doing Terry McLaurin for over 4.5 receptions. Again, I think we have a decent chance of stacking this game, and I think that'd be a good way to go about doing that. And for what it's worth, guys, Zach Ertz draws a phenomenal matchup as well. That's why I am really kind of gearing towards that over fantasy score. And then looking at the Baltimore Ravens, I'm a little bit surprised by the Zay Flowers 4.5 receptions line. This is one that was bumped to 5 like a day ago, so I kind of just wrote this one off, and then right before I started filming this, I was like, oh, this is back at 4.5. So all right, let's go back in on this. And that is also leading to another pretty good bet that we have is going to be Zay Flowers for over his PrizePicks fantasy score of 12. Underdog is valuing this a little bit higher as well at about 14. So kind of crazy there. So that tells us that we should be probably targeting Zay Flowers in some capacity. Again, this game is projected to be a high scoring game. Washington has been a very easy matchup for opposing teams. Zay Flowers ended up playing 81% of the snaps last week. So all that means good things. Now, if it is going to be a game in which Baltimore is winning by 7 points or so, then I think we would want to be targeting like Derrick Henry potentially rush attempts over 18 rush attempts, or just fine Derrick Henry's over rush yards. I don't exactly feel the need to go in on that, but that would also correlate pretty well with that game total of 7 points. Now, a bet that I personally don't mind, but the data is not exactly telling us to go out of our way to use it. Again, this would probably be more in a game stack, so we could do for say Terry McLaurin for over 4.5 receptions, Zach Ertz for over his fantasy score, Rashad Bateman for over his fantasy score of 6.5, and then do Zay Flowers over receptions over fantasy score, trying to target the overs in this high scoring game. I like that. And I don't think these are all too high, especially given the amount of snaps that all these players are going to play. So I don't mind the idea of doing Rashad Bateman. He's someone that's playing about 65% of the snaps. So I think I'd be pretty happy to do that there with Rashad Bateman, actually. So, just some pretty good edges, I would say. And then for what it's worth, like we are seeing some slight edges between like how Underdog is batting the slate compared to how PrizePicks is. Rashad Bateman for over his receiving yards there, for an example, would be a better bet on Underdog. So we move from one appealing game to another appealing game in terms of offensive production, the Arizona Cardinals versus the Green Bay Packers. So this game isn't exactly 50 points, but still 47 points is going to be a lot. The Packers are going to be favored to win by 5.5 points, which, man, it's tough to say if that's going to happen. The Packers are a team that really just kind of beat themselves. As a Packers fan, I can't really remember the last time they lost a game because the opponents just played flat out better than them. I think like Detroit early on in the season last year is the only one that really comes to mind, where every one of their other losses has been because of like dumb, stupid mistakes. So They clearly haven't alleviated those mistakes, and so I don't know. Like this Cardinals team is good. Just an interesting line. Now the Packers are going to get Romeo Dobbs back for this game, which is low key kind of big. Christian Watson is still expected to be out, and one big piece of news is that Luke Musgrave is going to be out as well. So we can kind of start with confidence. Tucker Kraft, and he was actually one of the best bets that we have on the board today, and I'll get into that in just a second. And for what it's worth, the Arizona Cardinals are pretty healthy, pretty much good to go. And so let's go ahead and jump into this game. We're going to be looking at the Arizona Cardinals prop bets that we have right now. James Conner, earlier on, again, when I was doing my research for this slate, yesterday, 2 days ago, one of the bets that was out there was James Conner for under his fantasy score popping up pretty early. And I was kind of curious as to why it's not popping up anymore, which is good because I disagreed with it, but was his fantasy score for the under. And I think we see probably why now, because the under touchdowns was about 53.3%. Touchdowns are fluky. I don't know. I don't really exactly love targeting under touchdowns in games that are projected to be high scoring. That's really up to you guys if you want to do that. Trey McBride under 5.5 receptions. Again, this game is supposed to be high scoring. Trey McBride's look good. I don't need to go in on that one as well. So I'm just going to pass up on those. They're not even a 50% likelihood to hit. So it's not like we need to go out of our way to target those, but still two bets that I personally don't feel the need to make. Like if I were to make a bet, I would actually really like the idea of doing Trey McBride for over 49.5 receiving yards. We can kind of see that this is the outlier data point. And again, given the fact that this game is projected to be pretty high scoring, Trey McBride is really the number 2 target in this offense. Maybe even number 1, you could argue. So I really don't mind that there with Trey McBride. But I do think Michael Wilson has a good chance to have a good game. Michael Wilson continues to kind of look good each and every game. Now, we're not getting any receptions props for him just yet on PrizePicks or Underdog. And so we're going to jump into the 9 to 5 player props cheat sheet. This is for the full slate. Want to call it, we have 1+ EV bet here on FanDuel. Ray McLeod over receptions, 3.5. Good call out. Yeah, let's take a peek at Michael Wilson. And so they have his receptions set at 3.5. All favoring the under pretty much there with him. And I think I'd be pretty okay with betting the over receptions there. You look at his stats, and I'm just going to click on one random column here. He's going up against a DST that only gives up about 3.2 receptions on average to opposing receivers in his role, but he does average 3.8. Vegas has him at 3.5, only projecting at 2.9. I guess that's more my way of saying, no, I think this game does have a good chance to be in a shootout. I think his snaps will be closer to 85% in this game. So Michael Wilson, I do like the idea of betting his over receptions as one of these ones where you can get at like plus 100 in most cases. But now we jump into the Green Bay Packers and looking at their bets. I do like the idea of betting Tucker Kraft for over 9 for a fantasy score. I continue to want to target Tucker Kraft. I've been on him since the offseason. I see no real reason to not be on him again this week. Matchup's not one that I'm really concerned about. Luke Musgrave is out. He clearly looks like a stud. I kind of put out on a tweet earlier on this offseason that I'm like, Tucker Kraft, more of a best ball tweet. Tucker Kraft is a tight end that you can draft in the last round of your drafts or near the last round of your drafts and get a top 10 player at his position. And like no one's doing it. And it was just crazy to me, really mind boggling. And sure enough, that has come to be true thus far, but I undersold. He's top 3 right now. And so that's crazy. And again, not really fluky. That's just who he is. He's a great tight end. I personally don't see a big difference in talent between him and McBride. Hopefully we don't see that again this week as a Packers fan, but I don't mind that. You could easily pair that up with Jordan Love for over his fantasy score. Kind of feels like the correct line for him. I just think Josh Jacobs is going to be a little bit more involved. I don't mind the idea of actually Josh Jacobs for over his fantasy score while we're here as well, 13.5, but you could potentially chase the middle here because Underdog has this line at 15 as well. So that's a little bit too high with how they're valuing him. Again, that'll be a little bit different when you look at Underdog because of the slight calculation difference, but they're clearly treating those two differently. Then we have an interesting line here with Romeo Dobbs. Romeo Dobbs at 9.5 for a fantasy score. Kind of the squeaky wheel gets the grease situation here. Seems like he was complaining a little bit, but he is a good red zone target. And he really hasn't he had like one game with like true Jordan Love, if you will, where that game against Brazil, you kind of write off. 2 games with Malik Willis. So he really hasn't had a chance to shine. And now you get a good matchup against Arizona. I think this is a good setup for him. And so if he does play a lot, that's going to suit well for him. I think it's worth calling out. Malik Heath played about 70% of the snaps last week that would have went to Romeo Dobbs. And so I think they're going to be more than happy to put Dobbs right back into his normal role. All right, guys. So now going to be a little bit more of quick pace here for the next few games. We've got Houston versus New England. Really not much there. I do like the idea of betting Jalen Polk for over 2.5 receptions, more as a sportsbook bet. He's someone that has seen increase in snaps the last 3 weeks. So it went from like 60% in week 3 to 80% in week 4, and then 100% in week 5. During the preseason, he averaged he had 2 receptions, and 3 receptions. It did seem like him and Drake May had a pretty good rapport as well throughout camp. So I do like that one, but I don't think we need to go too crazy with that. I do like Diggs to get over his receptions as well. That was one where it's more of a sportsbook bet, though. So let's go ahead and jump on into the next game. We got Tampa Bay versus New Orleans. Really one good bet here as well that I kind of see. And that's going to be looking at Cade Otton to get his over fantasy score. First and foremost with Cade Otton here, we see a decent prop line difference between how PrizePicks is valuing him this week compared to the projection data, compared to the average sportsbook line, compared to Underdog. To me, that's pretty huge. Also, he gets a great matchup here going against the Saints. This is the weakness of the Saints defense, has been opposing tight ends. Then on top of that, Cade Otton has been playing a lot, basically 90% of the snaps in every single game. He has been getting decently involved in the offense as well. So Cade Otton, I do like a decent amount in this matchup, about a 52.3% edge for the over as well. So I love the fact that the data is agreeing with this bet as well. Now we have another matchup here, Cleveland versus Philly, another like decent sportsbook bet. I do like the idea of Amari Cooper getting his over receptions of 4.5. That was a plus bet that you can make, almost an arbitrage bet as well. But that was really it in that game. Well, I guess I didn't mind Devonta Smith to get over 5.5 receptions as well. Devonta Smith has done that every single game of the year thus far, and I think I'm happy to do that, but at the same time, don't feel the need to force that. So let's jump into the next game here. We got the Colts versus the Titans. Some interesting stuff going on with the Colts reporting. So both Michael Pittman and Josh Downs were both DNPs for the first 2 weeks of practice, or first 2 days of practice. And then they're both full participants as I'm recording this. So I'm expecting them to both play if they're both full participants. There's some news about Michael Pittman Jr. going to the IR. We do know that Jonathan Taylor is out as well. But obviously, those two players being active or inactive do really change the nature of this slate. If they're out, one of my favorite bets was actually looking at Tony. And so, yeah, taking a peek at Tony Pollard, it's interesting. They actually bumped down his rush attempts on PrizePicks to 15 from 15.5. And I would assume that's literally due to that news. You know, if Pittman and Downs are both active in this game, even with Jonathan Taylor out, it still does provide a little bit of resistance there. Tony Pollard has been great, playing a lot more snaps than what I thought, over 65% of the snaps in every game. Maybe, they are coming in off of a bye. Maybe that changes, but I just don't see that. And so I don't mind the idea. Betting is over rush yards. This is a good matchup going against the Colts as well, but this was something that was much more appealing yesterday. In case you guys didn't catch it, I was kind of planning on doing the video yesterday, and then there was some news items. I'm like, all right, let's just wait and do the deep dive so I don't have to change it. This was one of those things. And so kind of risk reward with this bet now. And so with that, guys, let's go ahead and jump on into the next game here. We got the Chargers versus the Denver Broncos, and a very interesting game. Just looking at the game total, it's about 35.5. The Chargers are favored to win by 3 points. It is important to point out that Justin Herbert has been a little bit banged up. Seems like he's going to be good to go in this game. Josh Reynolds is going to be out for the Denver Broncos, which means my guy, Devon Valet, should get a lot of work in this game as well. We're going to see Humphrey as well get a decent amount of work. We know it's Cortland Sutton or bust. I do think it's worth spending a little bit of time talking about Denver as well, because some of the teams I've kind of skipped over because they're a little bit more straightforward. You could argue with the Saints, if Taysom Hill's active, that helps the offense a lot. Sure, I might have missed on that, but really every other offense pretty much straightforward except for Denver. They've been very difficult to figure out because there hasn't really been a rhyme or reason for the snaps. We see Cortland Sutton getting only 80% the last 3 weeks, which is a little bit strange as well. I will say that, but we know he's the top receiver there. And then Humphrey, yeah, he's been getting more work. Josh Reynolds probably not going to see as much work. Javonte Williams, and it seems like they've been trying to get him to lose the job, and each time a running back gets injured, Audric Estime, I believe, was activated off the IR, so he could be someone that gets some work in this game, but it's really just been him splitting work with Jaleel McLaughlin. But the offense does operate a little bit more as a traditional offense with Javonte Williams in there. I thought that was noteworthy to call that out. Like we really can't trust really that many players here. And a lot of the times we're just betting the unders. And so really, guys, I see kind of two bets in this game that I kind of like. I don't mind Quentin Johnston, honestly, to get over 7.5 for his fantasy score. That's a pretty low line for a guy that, is kind of their red zone threat. Yes, you worry about him getting the Patrick Surtain shadow coverage, but at the same time, does Johnston really would you really do that? I don't see the need to do that. Maybe, he will get some of him. I just don't know if he'll get the full game. I think Lad McConkey will get some of him. I think Josh Palmer maybe. But I don't know if there's a big need for that. And so I don't mind this over. It's actually one of the better bets that we have. But also, I don't mind the idea of doing Bo Nix for under his fantasy score. I think this is a better bet on underdog where, it's a little bit higher. 0.5 difference could end up being the difference between it cashing or not. So I think that's a better bet there in underdog. But given the nature of this game, the low scoring nature of this game, I think it's a good under. And if you look at it, I think what Bo Nix has kind of showed us thus far in his career is that in tough matchups, he's going to be pretty bad. So Pittsburgh was bad. The Seahawks, he didn't look good in that game as well. Tampa Bay was a good defense. He did enough. And then you look at the matchup against the Jets. Yeah, he just was terrible in that matchup. And then last week, the Raiders just didn't look good, and he was able to do decently well. I think that was more of an issue of the Raiders not being that good. And so I do think this Chargers defense is for real. And so I really don't mind the idea of betting the under here then for him fantasy score wise, just because he is someone that has seemingly struggled against good teams. In the preseason looked good and basic coverage was able to do well there, but given a good defense, I think he's going to struggle. And so, guys, for the next two games, I really don't have much. Like I think Najee Harris could have a pretty good game. There is actually a bet here for Atlanta versus Carolina that popped up recently, and so let's show you guys that one. This is actually gonna be the best bet on the board right now. Oh, second best. Mike Evans under receptions is popping up now as well. Interesting. But Kirk Cousins for over his fantasy score. So first and foremost, we do see that there's a slight prop line difference between how PrizePicks and Underdog are valuing this. It should really never be off by one compared to, or when you're looking at the quarterback position. Because there's no like calculation difference here. There's no like 0.5 PPR versus full point PPR. And so right away, that's one that I like. It's a good matchup going against Carolina. The one concern that you would have here is the fact that this could actually be a game in which Bijan Robinson really just gets going. So I don't mind that. I actually don't mind pairing this with Kyle Pitts as well. But that's not a bet that I'm like overly wanting to bet either. It's just kind of okay. I thought Kyle Pitts looked great finally in his career, but that's also one where it just doesn't feel a need to go out of it. But I will be doing Kirk Cousins over 16 for his fantasy score. I mentioned this. Kirk Cousins, guys, looked great last week, looked great the previous week. He only looked really bad one week, the first week, and that wasn't even as bad as people thought. I think people were just like, I don't know, they just panicked on that. It was weird. But if you look at the season before he got injured, he was elite. I mean, he really was looking like one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I kind of think he was the best quarterback in the league at that moment that he got injured. Wasn't that good of quarterback play going on there? And you could argue right now that he is the best quarterback in the league based off of last week's game. It was an easy matchup last week. He gets an easy matchup this week as well. I know Daniels and Lamar Jackson are playing well, and they're going against each other. I get that. Third best, whatever. Don't get mad at me, comment section. But this is a good bet. I like this bet. And then, guys, let's jump into the last game, which is going to be one of the higher scoring games on the slate. And so, obviously, we get excited for a high scoring game because that typically means we can bet some overs. So this game, 52.5. Lions are favored to win by 3 points. I would agree with that. If you guys remember last week, I was very confused that the Cowboys weren't favored to win by 3 points. Seemed like a very big mistake to me. I think they were like 2.5 point dogs against the Steelers. That was a strange one. I really don't see like any strange lines just in general for this slate. Like I would argue the Bears probably should be higher favorites, but that game's in London and Jaguars have experience traveling there. So like it makes sense. Again, if Pittman and like Downs were out, sure, I could see Titans win by more than that, but who knows? I know the Eagles have been like terrible. Almost 10 points does seem to be crazy. Like that's probably the one that sticks out to me the most. It really wouldn't be, it would be a little bit shocking, I guess, how Cleveland looked last week, but they have the talent to be in that game. So yeah, there's nothing that's really too crazy to me. Game-wise, I wish I could give you guys one. I just don't have that. I don't think there's a crazy outlier. It's honestly maybe Washington, Baltimore. It's probably it. I'd probably take Washington to cover 6 points, 6 points, 7 points in some cases. But getting back to this Lions versus Cowboys game, really no injuries for the Lions. And for Detroit, in terms of who we're targeting as well, really no injuries here. Now, the tough part about Detroit is that they had David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, who can both, they're both great. They're both great backs. Tough to predict there. Really, the only one that we can count on with any sort of predictability has been St. Brown. A little bit of Jared Goff, I guess, but Laporta has been maybe more of what I thought he would be coming into this season, which is just overrated, I should say. I've mentioned this a bunch now. My fear with Laporta last year was that so much of his production came out of scheme rather than his own talent. And like people were overvaluing his talent and maybe even his role a little bit because with the resurgence of Jameson Williams really coming out and playing well, they haven't needed Laporta as much. And so, yeah, I think that has went hand in hand. He did have his best game of the year last week. Maybe that helps. Again, this game is high scoring. We probably do want to be chasing some overs, but that's kind of interesting there. And I do want to call out Dallas. And again, hopefully you guys pay attention to kind of how much I was hyping up Jalen Tolbert. I felt like I was hyping him up a decent amount when I had a very massive game against Pittsburgh, which Pittsburgh's a tough matchup. Now he gets a great matchup against Detroit, one of the best matchups thus far this season. I'm expecting big things from Jalen Tolbert in this game. And so I will say the prop bets that we are getting for this game all seem to be pretty much correct. Like I think Jameson Williams, maybe for over 3.5 receptions, could be a good one on a sports book. Obviously, that's not a good bet on PrizePicks or Underdog. Jake Ferguson, I would argue, like, I don't really care. I think he has a perfect chance to get 5 receptions. And I shouldn't say perfect, a very good chance to get 5 receptions. And I would be favoring the over more so there. He's just been so involved in this offense. He has been kind of the second passing weapon in this offense. And then it has been Jalen Tolbert now. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb's going to be number 1. So I think we could easily do Jake Ferguson for over 5 receptions, maybe more of a game stack. And then I do want to call it like David Montgomery for his longest reception. I don't mind him to get over 6.5 receiving yards on Underdog. I think that's a pretty good bet that we could be making there. Don't really need to make it at 7.5. This is actually dropped from 8.5 like a couple of days ago. So I think I'm happy to bet the over there, given the fact that it's dropped. Again, if it's a high scoring game, I think he will be involved in the passing game. Sign me up for that. And then, yeah, guys, Jalen Tolbert for over 4 for his receptions is kind of like Jake Ferguson. I think he has a great chance to get 4 receptions just for it to be a push regardless. But I also think he has a great chance to get 5 receptions. He had 7 receptions last week, 10 targets. The game ended up being a little bit, I guess, of a weird game script, but it did promote passing at the end of the game, and I think that's what we're going to see again here. So don't mind Jalen Tolbert for over his receptions as well. So with that, guys, I'm about to get into the bet of the day for this video. But first, make sure to give a like and subscribe to the channel. If you guys want access to any of the tools that you saw in this video, head on over to 9to5sports.com. And if you guys have never signed up before, use the promo code KEEPCASH and get 20% off your first membership. Whether you're a returning customer or a new customer, you'll get 20% off that first month. So turn your $10 membership into an $8 membership for the first month. And so looking at the bet of the day here, going to be focusing more on PrizePicks. Obviously, I went through the video and touched on a bunch of good prop bets we have for Underdog. Feel free to go out and use those. But right now, one of the best like pure EV bets that we have where, it's taking the Vegas line and using the PrizePicks line and saying, all right, we have a 53.8% chance for this bet to hit. It's going to be Zay Flowers for over 4.5 receptions. So that's one of the best bets on the board. That's obviously going to be one that we need to target. And then we get into, a little bit of mix between the data and personally my thoughts. The nice thing is that the data does agree with my thoughts as well, which I like to see. So Bo Nix under 13.5 for a fantasy score going against that Chargers defense, just assuming that they're going to be as good as they have been thus far this season. They are coming in off of a bye. So I think that's going to be a good thing for them, more time to prepare. And he has just struggled against tough defenses. And then Jalen Tolbert, you can really choose whichever one you want. His fantasy scores are like 9 or 9.5. You could run that over as well. It should all correlate pretty well. Again, mostly attacking, the number 2 receiver in this offense, a guy that played 80, I can't remember if it was like 89 or 81% snaps, whatever, a ton of snaps in that game last week, 10 targets, obviously looked good, a little bit of a breakout party. You take out Brandon Cooks, and that's just going to elevate Jalen Tolbert's role, who does look very similar to Cooks. I really like that fantasy score in a very high-scoring game. And then continuing to attack another high-scoring game, we got Tucker Kraft for over his fantasy score of 9. Don't exactly love that Dobbs is back, and like that. Like part of the reason why we loved him last week in props betting and DFS for sure was the situation was elite, and it still is pretty good. And I still love his role. going to get 80% to 90% of the snaps. Feel pretty good about that in that matchup. And then we get one of the best tight end matchups is on the slate. Kate on for over 7.5 for a fantasy score. Mostly just the matchup thing, but he's playing a bunch of snaps. Maybe we get lucky with the touchdown. He hits that easily. And then Kirk Cousins, probably one of the more strange ones, I would say, going against Carolina. I'm assuming it's because they could blow him out and maybe there isn't a need for a pass-heavy script in the second half. Maybe Bijan Robinson gets going, Tyler Algier even for that matter. But we did see the line on Underdog is at 17, which the data agrees with is more of the correct line, and I agree with that as well. So that's going to be all for this video, guys. I appreciate you guys being here. Make sure to head on over to 9to5sports.com to get access to all the tools that you saw available in this video. I do appreciate that, guys. Again, use the promo code KEEPCASH and get the first month for $8 a month instead of $10. Still a great value regardless. Make sure to give a like and subscribe. Comment what your favorite bet was mentioned in this video. All right, thanks for watching, guys. Good luck. And as always, let's keep cash.